Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. We have with us today Ayelet Waldman, and I pronounced it correctly.
Beautifully.
Ayelet Waldman. And she's written a number of things, but we're really today going to talk about her latest book called Love and Other Impossible Pursuits, which is a novel published by Doubleday. Thanks for coming by.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show.
And just so that people know we're talking to the same Ayelet Waldman that they know and love from other places and things, you are described by some as a fiery essayist.
Okay.
You are a columnist for Salon.com, the author of Daughter's Keeper and the Mommy Track Mystery Series.
Right.
So you've been to the wars here. I mean, and now you've written this novel, which is described in several ways. One way, on the jacket, it says that you've crafted a strikingly beautiful novel for our time, tackling the absurdities of modern life and reminding us why we love some people no matter what. I mean, this is very serious stuff. On the other hand, you yourself, in an interview, and I'm not sure where this appeared because the Xerox is kind of faint, you said, this is one woman's grotesque and unacceptable inability to love her insufferable 5-year-old stepson. Which is it?
Well, it depends if I'm trying to sell the book or not. It's both. It's a conglomeration of those two fabulous things.
I think you're right, because I think what you do here is you give us people in a very honest frame, always honest. Sometimes complimentary, more often not. Sometimes very deep and probing, and sometimes just kind of punching at the surface. Mm-hmm. So that's probably true. Now, it's if it's all those things and more, mm-hmm. For the sake of our audience,
yes,
let's talk a little bit about the story, and then the cast of characters: William, Carolyn, Jack, Amelia. What is the story?
It's a story about the way I see it. Really is. You remember those movies from the 1930s where, Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart meet and they loathe each other and there's sparks flying. But you're sitting in the audience and you know that these people are meant to be together.
Right.
They're supposed to fall in love. And you're also...
You just have to wait a
Right.
reel.
You're fairly comfortable in the notion that you're going to sit... Like, the movie's not going to be about them hating each other for 2 hours. It's going to be this arc story about them falling in love. And the way this book is constructed is really like that, except the love that I'm talking about is not romantic love. It's maternal love. At the beginning of the book, you see Amelia. She's a young woman married to a man named Jack, and then Jack has a son. So Amelia has a stepson. His name is William. He's 5 years old. And at the beginning of the book, the only person it's sort of a toss-up whether William likes Amelia less or Amelia likes William less. They're like oil and water. They do not get along. She feels tremendous guilt because she can't stand her stepson. And the story really is about how and if they'll fall in love.
And the thing that's holding them back, I think, or one of the things that's holding them back from falling in love, is the precociousness.
Right.
And the verbal precociousness of this kid.
Yeah.
They're going into Central Park, and she says, well, the name of this gate is such and such. And he says, oh, no, it isn't, according to the book you gave me.
Right.
And on and on and on.
Well, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about is, first of all, the idea that there are children that you just don't like, which is something you can't really say. But anyone who spent any time with children knows that sometimes you meet they're people and they are different. And some of them are just unpleasant. But also this kind of hyper-gifted child that we see nowadays, and I'm not even sure if it has anything to do so much with that child's intelligence as it has to do with the parents' investment in having a gifted kid. So parents put so much pressure on their children to be gifted in a specific way, to function in the adult world, to speak an adult language. And let me give you an example. My kid, my older son, when he was 17 months old, he could recite the planets in order from the sun.
No.
Yeah, Mercury, Venus, Earth, the whole thing. Now, it was a party trick, because it had this adult sort of importance. It seemed like he was brilliant, but really he might as well have been memorizing the different Teletubbies.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of kid I wanted to write about, that kid who's forced to live in the adult world, who's forced to function like a little circus dog. And you see these kids all over the place. You see them everywhere.
In a certain way, I think Love and Other Impossible Pursuits is really William's and Amelia's story. And when we come back, we're going to look at the two of them a little more closely.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. The guest today, Ayelet Waldman, the book Love and Other Impossible Pursuits, a novel published by Doubleday. Notice how we credit the publisher.
Absolutely.
Very, very important. One of the people saying nice things about your book in advance, as we say, is one Sherman Alexie, author of 10 Little Indians. I read this book in one sitting while lying on my favorite couch, and I'll read it again on a future road trip, and I'll read it for a third time in the bathtub. Ayelet Waldman is that good. I mean, from the couch to the trip to the bathtub. I've never heard such great praise. On the other hand, hopefully, when it's in the bathtub, it'll get wet and have to buy another copy.
I know, exactly. That's what we're doing.
I hate this, one copy going through 3 readings. This is not good.
What I love about Sherman is that he's just as funny blurbing as he is. I love his books. They're so, they're bitter and funny, and that's sort of my ideal. That's why I sent him this copy, because he manages to do that same thing, black comedy and also deep heartfelt emotion that I was striving for.
That's great. That's great. It's a great quote. I love it. At the end of reading the book, I was not in the bathtub. I was actually at the dining room table. I don't know whether that's allowed.
We had a reading supper. We used to have those when we were kids.
Oh, okay. At the end of my reading, I was thinking about William and Amelia, and I began to feel that both of them were in a sense hiding. Mm-hmm. William hiding behind his precociousness, and Amelia hiding behind her mourning for Isabel, the infant who died. I
think that's really that's very insightful. I mean, that's what they are each wrapped in this carapace. William is doing his best not to be hurt. His parents got divorced. He was devastated by this fissure in his life. And now he constructs this whole persona so that he never has to feel any pain. And
a persona that you brilliantly sum up in one sentence. I have to share this.
Absolutely.
William, you say, is generally akin to an hour with William is generally akin to sitting through a college lecture from a very short professor. That really does sum it up. The kid won't shut up. Factoid. And he's killing her.
Right. I mean, and so many, there's so many kids like that. I mean, how many kids know every dinosaur? Everything about every dinosaur. They correct you vigorously.
I got one up in Marin County.
Exactly.
And I have no idea what the kid is talking about.
Dare
None.
you call a brontosaurus a brontosaurus instead of an apatosaurus, and you're just the stupidest person in America.
It's a new kind of mortal sin.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's exactly what it is, and we're committing it all the time. Now, on the other hand, your description of our friend's anger, that's a little longer. Amelia, a few people know I am this angry. Mindy knows how I feel about mothers because she feels the same way as I do, and she's had many miscarriages. I once told Jack about wishing that another baby had been taken in Isabel's place. What I have said to no one is that I cannot imagine having another baby. I don't want another baby precisely because Sonia's wrong. I would want my new baby to die if I could somehow get Isabel in return. She's really at this point at the far end of it.
Yeah.
I think.
I think so. I mean, I think, I think that kind of rage is really what people experience, and when it's particularly a loss of an infant, when you feel the sense of incredible guilt because this was a child that you were supposed to protect. It's you feel so guilty and so angry, and you can never confess your anger, particularly when your anger gets focused on pregnant women, which it often does. I know one of the reasons I wrote this book was because I lost a pregnancy late in my second trimester, the baby that would have been my third child. And I was in a support group for other women who'd experienced the same loss. And we used to get together periodically for lunch. And if there were pregnant women in the restaurant, we did not censor ourselves at all. We just we talked through our losses. And I really think that part of what we were doing was we were trying to pop the balloon of their contentment. I mean, we wanted them to know that, you may get nothing out of this. There might be no joy at the end of this experience because we were our rage felt infectious. We just wanted to have everyone else experience it too. And that kind of sort of smug contentment of pregnant women seemed like an affront. But, I realized going through that when I was recovered or healed or whatever it was when I could see a pregnant woman and stop being angry, just feel a sort of generalized, pleasure at her joy.
But that kind of group is the kind of group that Amelia will not go near.
Absolutely. She completely rejects it.
There's a lot of story in Love and Other Impossible Pursuits. There's a lot of funny stuff, most of which we haven't gotten to. And also there's a lot of wisdom. I want to look at that wisdom when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster, Conversations on the Coast, talking with Ayelet Waldman about Love and Other Impossible Pursuits, a novel that I really like very, very much, published by Doubleday. And somebody else who likes it a lot is Julie Oringer, author of How to Breathe Underwater. We have a strange group of endorsers here. Love and Other Impossible Pursuits is the most riveting and sharply rendered novel I've read in years. Ayelet Waldman writes the language of grief with virtuosic fluency. I've never known anybody with virtuosic fluency before. I'm very pleased to meet you.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Piercing, provocative, and unflinchingly honest, she makes us rapt participants in her protagonist's struggle with the most painful complications of marriage and motherhood. Once you begin this book, there will be no putting it down. Once you've finished, you will never forget it. And I strongly agree with you will never forget it. One of the things that you won't forget, and I do want to mention this, is the humor in the book, and we haven't really gotten to it. But I think if I suggest to you one scene, you'll help us get to the humor. The scene I'm thinking of is when William explains to Amelia why her daughter was not a person.
Well, William has this, they're sitting and they're having a very pleasant, one of the first really pleasant interactions they've had. They're eating cupcakes at a cafe, and
evil cupcake,
yes,
with milk in them.
Yes, exactly, and because William fancies himself lactose intolerant. But what happens is that they're having this perfectly lovely conversation, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, William instructs Amelia on the intricacies of Jewish law and tells her that he isn't really upset about the baby having died because, according to his Episcopal mother, Jewish law provides that a baby is not a person until he or she is 8 days old, and since the baby died at 2 days old, it's really fine for them all.
So why not sell his $1,000 crib on eBay?
Right, exactly. And this is when Amelia really sort of starts to lose it with William, and then begins a series of these. She's followed William's mother Carolyn's prohibitions for William fairly closely. William's has to be in a booster seat whenever he rides in a taxi cab, and William can't be outside in the wet, and William is supposedly lactose intolerant, although Amelia did accidentally feed him ricotta cheesecake and he was fine. So now all of a sudden,
tasted terrific.
Right now, all of a sudden, she starts to she starts to kind of let it go. And she starts to say, you know what? You don't want to ride in a car seat? I don't care if you ride in a car seat or not. And then she does all these things that are totally irresponsible. You know, he skates without a helmet. He's supposed to have a helmet. And the irony is, she does this out of a kind of anger and impatience. And, you know, it's almost like she's trying to hurt him, but she, you know, not really, because she's not really causing him any harm. But he perceives of this as this loosening of the bonds that have constricted him his whole life, and it actually is what starts to make him feel more affectionate towards her. And then they have this secret, and they have this kind of fun together, and that's ironically the beginning of their sort of rapprochement is the things that she does out of, you know, deepest irresponsibility.
And indeed, there is a rapprochement between the two at the very end. And if you folks out there want to know about that rapprochement, go out and buy the book and read it, because we're not going to let it out of the bag. What we are going to talk about for a couple of minutes is Amelia and Jack as an example of a bashert.
Bashert, yes.
Bashert.
This is an old Jewish midrash, a story about how one experiences the feeling of having a soulmate. And the story is that before you're born, the angel of death takes your soul through a kind of movie version of your life. You know, this is what's going to happen to you. This is what you're going to meet. This is what you're going to do. And he takes you on this tour, and then he returns you to the very starting point. And one of the things he shows you during this tour is the person who is your soulmate, your intended, the one you're meant to be with. So then he brings you back to the starting point, and he taps you on the little space between your nose and your mouth, your philtrum, making that tiny dent we all have. And you forget. Then you're born. And if you are lucky enough to meet during your life the person that the angel of death showed you, then suddenly you experience this moment of intense recognition.
I have a problem with this.
You do?
No, it really kills the matchmaking business.
Yeah, there you go.
You know,
although,
really.
you know, anyway, my husband and I were fixed up on a blind date by his best friend from high school and my roommate. And that's really, you know, matchmaking. And we, you know, I wrote about this because I really did experience some kind of, I didn't believe in it before, but when I met him, I experienced this intense love at first sight. I saw him standing between two panes of bulletproof glass in my apartment in the East Village. And I thought, he was standing there with a bouquet of irises, and it wasn't like I heard bells and angels.
Panes of bulletproof.
Yes, you know, it's
God,
New York.
You can't get much more
New York
romantic
pre-Giuliani.
than that.
But what I felt was like, oh my God, now I can finally stop dating. And that's how I knew I was in love.
We have been having a very, very good time here talking to Ayelet Waldman about a very, very fine novel called Love and Other Impossible Pursuits. I'm sorry it's over. I'm Jim Foster. This has been Conversations on the Coast.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC, or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.